really just amazing. Do you agree with me on this?
Thanks.
Thank you, Jake.
I'm on.
As you get plugged in, I would just like to thank you so much for coming. It has been so inspiring yesterday, and we so look forward to today. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Good morning, everybody. Are we ready to go? Great. We'll get Perth caught up here soon. I am getting plugged in, and as I do that, if you want to open in your packet to page 26. Scott and I are thrilled to be back with you this morning. We got a little bit of sleep, and it's like late afternoon for us in the U.S., so we're ready to go. We're wide awake. All right. Yes, page 26 within your packet. You have 2 core commitments left, and just to give you a preview of where we're headed for today, today is going to be less new content. There's still some new content, but you've made it through the majority of new content. We've got these 2 core commitments. Scott will come up and help us think about you're going to have an hour, 15 minutes of team time to figure out where you go from here. Scott will come back, help us figure out how we take next steps on that, how we continue to lead and shift culture. And one thing that we haven't talked much about is at the end of today, you're actually going to be giving a presentation, okay? Some of you just that kind of caught your breath. We'll be dividing into your coaching groups later, and with your coaching group and the handful of other churches, your church will be sharing, here's what we're going to go and do next. You don't have to get on stage. You don't have to have a keynote or a PowerPoint. We'll give you some more instructions on what you're going to do, but yes, you as a team will be sharing, this is what we're going to do once we get back and go to our church. So just in case you needed something to wake you up this morning, there it is. Make sure you're listening carefully so that you're ready, and I'll be giving you specific instructions on that in the next couple of hours. Okay, we're going to go to priority. On page 26, this is your 5th core commitment. And I want to start out with some stop signs. These are American stop signs. Do these look close to Australian stop signs? Stop signs are just universal. We don't have the koala kangaroo crossing. I think that's my favorite. It's like the double koala kangaroo crossing sign. There's one right up this way. The point being, so you've heard a handful of these presentations by now. It can be easy to think, okay, we're just going to coast and kind of keep moving forward. We don't want you to miss any of these core commitments, but we especially don't want you to miss this core commitment on priority. And we found that it's one of the easiest to miss out on. Okay, and here's what I mean. As a research team, when we were going through this process and we were trying to figure out what do churches need to form or disciple young people well, what do churches need to do to grow young, we came up with an initial list. So before we even started the research, our team got together and came up with a list of here's the things we think a church will need to do to grow young. We initially had this idea of making young people a priority on the list, but we ended up taking it off of our list. Here's the reason that we did that. It felt so obvious that we didn't even need to state it. Okay, so it's kind of like if you're going to get healthy or you're going to lose weight, well, of course, if I want to eat healthier or lose weight, I need to make the decision to eat healthier or lose weight. Same thing with young people, right? If we're going to form or disciple young people well, of course we need to make the decision that we're going to form or disciple young people well. Fast forward in our research, we started out by surveying the leaders of these 250 congregations. We asked them all of these detailed questions about what they do. And then at the end of the survey, we said, what have we not asked about that you think is really important that needs to be on our list? Guess what the number 1 item was in those responses? We made the intentional decision to make young people a priority within our church. All of a sudden, that went right back on our list, and it continued to play out throughout the research. A few of you have asked the question, in this diagram, what does the dotted line mean that's pointed off to the left and points towards growing old? I want to take a moment to explain this. First of all, to clarify terms, okay? I want to clarify terms briefly between growing young and growing old, and part of the reason that we're calling this process that of growing together. We intentionally called the book Growing Young because we think it's what many churches need to do. Just the simple reality, when we say growing old, we're not saying getting older is a bad thing. We're not against older people. But if your church continues to grow old, if its membership continues to age, what will eventually happen to your church? Literally, your church will die because the people in your church will die. It is the inevitable conclusion of if our churches continue to grow old. Now, when we say grow young, that does not mean that we get rid of older people. It does not mean that we're against older people. It does not mean that our church should only include younger people. What we do mean is that it is possible for us to grow old and for us to grow young at the exact same time. Physically, our bodies and our buildings will continue to grow old. That is something that we cannot avoid. But while our buildings are growing older, while our bodies are growing older, it's possible that we can grow young in our mindset, that we can grow young in our perspective, that the average age in our church can continue to grow young because we've always got younger people who are coming and joining alongside older people, right? So physically, we are continuing to grow old, while in our mindset, perspective, and average age, we continue to grow young. Here's what that means on the diagram right here. If you want your church to continue to grow young, we think you need to continue to do these 6 things. We found that this idea of prioritizing young people everywhere is the hinge point of the whole process. What we mean by that is these other 5 things: being a good neighbor, practicing key chain leadership, empathizing, taking Jesus' message seriously, and warm relationships. It's possible for a church to do those things well with one generation. And in fact, there are many of our churches that have done those 5 things well with one generation. Perhaps we started doing them 40 years ago when one generation was in their 20s and 30s. And then 10 years later, we did it well with that same group in their 30s and 40s. And then 10 years later, we did it well with that same group who are now in their 40s and 50s. Today, we're still doing those 5 things well with that same age group, but that same age group is in their, say, 50s and 60s. For some of this sounds familiar because we've done these 5 things well. The question is, are we going to continue to prioritize young people, not just at one point and we grow with them, but we're going to prioritize that generation's children, that generation's grandchildren. We stated in the packet this way at the top, and I'm just going to read it because I think we say it clearly here. The hinge point separating churches that grow old from those that grow young is priority. When churches prioritize young people and their families everywhere, they take a step beyond both empathy and warmth. They allocate resources, energy, and attention to teenagers and young adults, both inside and outside their walls. Here's another way to say it. When it comes to our focus on young people, we think there is a big difference between our rhetoric related to young people and our reality around young people. I have yet to come across a church where their motto is, "We hate young people." Has anyone been there to that church, at least where it's like their stated banner or on their website, right? Like, no young people welcome here. Most any church that I've come across has amazing intentions toward a younger generation, desires to invest in a younger generation, will say things like young people are the future of our church. The challenge is that our practice does not always match our reality. So here's the last piece I'd say about the difference between growing young, growing old, and growing together. For some of us, it's actually going to be very important that we talk about growing young and that we meet and address the resistance to the term growing young, because it's something that our church really needs to do, and we need to address and respond to that resistance and maybe have one-on-one conversations with people. For some of our churches, I would recommend you don't touch the term growing young with a 10-foot pole, because you're going to get so much resistance, right? That it's fine for you to have read the book Growing Young and you're thinking about the process of growing young, but anytime you're talking about it with your church, it's about how we grow together, right? The speed at which we address change, and this is what Scott has been talking about, needs to be addressed with listening, with empathy, so it is up to you to address and respond to what your church is ready for. We'll continue talking about that. Think about this idea of priority. We found that it's a myth that if you want to prioritize young people, you need a big modern building or you have to have a big budget. I want to take us back to this statement that we started with, and this diagram is in your packet, that everyone rises when we focus on young people. We were talking to a senior pastor, and here's what the senior pastor said. He said, in our church, we have a limited set of resources. Can you raise your hand if your church has a limited amount of resources, right? All right, to turn to basic kind of resource financial allocation, this is a pie chart. If you're not into pie charts, just think of it like a pie, right? You pick what kind of pie you like. What this senior pastor said to us is in any church, we have a limited amount of resources, so we allocate a certain percentage of those resources to young people. And it stands to reason that if we were to allocate a larger percentage of our time, attention, and resources to young people, there would be less for everyone else to go around. Well, what the senior pastor said, and if you look at see there's two circles, see the smaller circle on the inside? There's a smaller circle and then a bigger circle on the outside. What the senior pastor said is when we chose to invest more time, energy, and resources into young people, we thought that there would be less for everyone else to go around. But what he said is as we did that strategically, as we did that intentionally, it's not that there was less for others, it's that the whole pie in our church actually got bigger. That there was actually more for everyone else to go around because our church was growing, our church was thriving in ways that it wouldn't without the energy and attention of young people. So what I want to unpack here is what does it mean for us to give younger people a bigger slice of the pie? Okay, if we're going to give young people a bigger slice, here's a few things that it means. The first one is this, intentionally paying attention. And we are tracking with your packet. It means intentionally paying attention. An idea that goes along with that you might practice is asking this question, who are the young people around us? It's simply having the discussion inside of our church and in our wider community, who are the young people who are part of our church? Does anyone want to guess what's a good way to get in touch with the perspective of young people in your church? Listening to them, right? Are you starting to notice some themes that are coming out within our work, right? It's through the listening process that you're going to start to understand who are your young people and what's important to them. So it begins with listening, but for those of you who do make resource decisions in your church, I want to point out this. We think that your budget is a manifesto of your priorities. Your budget is a manifesto of your priorities. We have come across churches who say, we've tried, we're struggling with young people, it's just not working. And as we get to know them and we gain trust, at one point we'll say, well, can we look at your budget and how you're spending your money and what you're investing time, energy, and attention in? And oftentimes that church is not investing much by way of time, energy, or resources in young people, but somehow hoping that it will happen. Now, I am all for, if let's say you have a part-time or full-time youth pastor or youth leader on your team, I'm in favor of increasing the youth budget or the youth salary. I'm not opposed to those things. But it doesn't always mean that you're just channeling more money into youth ministry. There are churches that we've worked with where the way they've decided to invest in young people is actually investing more money in adult discipleship. Here's the reason why. If you remember the video about Myron yesterday, there are churches who have said, we really want to form and disciple our young people. What is the best way for us to do that? Their next conclusion, we need well-formed, mature Christian adults who are ready to invest in young people. So they made the decision, we're going to invest more money to form and disciple our adults, and that is our strategy for youth ministry. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm not just saying increase your youth budget, although that's not a bad idea if you have the time, energy, and attention, but it's about making those decisions intentionally and strategically. At this point, I normally need to say, we are not talking about spoiling young people or idolizing young people or acting like young people are the solution to every problem that we have. What we are talking about is giving young people the scaffolding that they need to grow up to be thriving Christian adults. Okay, the second thing that if we're going to give young people a bigger slice, it means that we are prioritizing families. Giving young people a bigger slice means that we are prioritizing families. The research from us, from a variety of others, continues to affirm the primary spiritual influence in the life of a child is, anybody want to fill in the blank? It's their parents. The primary spiritual influence, research continues to reveal, primary spiritual influence in the life of a young person is their parents, grandparents, extended family around them. Notice I did not say youth pastor, their leader in Pathfinders, senior pastor. Certainly that happens in different ways, shapes, and forms, but the primary spiritual influence in the life of a young person is that young person's parents and family. It stands to reason that if we really want to form young people well, we need to be investing and equipping in how we form and train their parents to pass on their faith. At the Fuller Youth Institute, we like to talk about one group that we call dry cleaner parents. Now, a dry cleaner parent is that parent that drops their kid off at your programming for about 75 minutes. They want them kind of nice, scrubbed, spiritually clean, and then pick them up 75 minutes later with their sins washed away and they're ready, right? Has anyone come across dry cleaner parents before? Yeah, they're kind of outsourcing their spiritual formation and discipleship of their kids to the church. Now, it's easy to get down on parents who are doing that, but I think if we're honest, in many ways, we as church leaders have been complicit in that process. We've actually encouraged parents, hey, we're the experts, this is what we do. Drop your kids off, let us form their faith. We think there's a number of parents, they simply don't feel equipped to train and disciple their children. That's why they come to us for help. But there's ways that we can become more family friendly, that we can actually equip parents with small things like, do parents know how to share their spiritual journey with their kids? We found one of the most impactful things for young people, for children, is if they know how and why their parents became a Christian. But do parents actually understand? Do they know how to tell their kids the story of, here's why I'm an Adventist. This is why it matters to me. This is how faith matters to me. A couple ideas that go along with this. We can rethink how we staff youth or young adult ministry. Do we have this picture in our head that the ideal youth ministry volunteer is age 18 or age 21, really with it in terms of culture and music and social media? Or might there be others that we can consider who make up our primary youth ministry volunteers? We've begun sharing this idea that maybe we think outside of the box for who should be investing in our young people. And we've gotten pictures from youth leaders across the U.S. and across the world of who they're recruiting as their new youth ministry volunteers. So on the left, this is Kyle. He's a youth pastor in California. These are his new youth ministry recruits. Frank, age 81 on the left, and Greg, age 79. Both of them have become small group leaders within their church. There's a bit of awkwardness in the beginning, the moment that you can connect some of your 16-year-olds to some of your 79-year-olds. It is amazing the bond that can be formed. Has anyone seen the movie Up before? Mr. Fredrickson, right? I mean, that's kind of the idea that we're talking about here. We're not on a mission just to make little kids and senior adults best friends. But when those connections start to happen in the life of the church in ways they haven't before, amazing things start to happen. Another idea is to create training and communication rhythms with parents. I think for many of us, especially in youth ministry, if we're honest, we take kind of a last-minute shotgun approach. Oh, hey, that retreat is happening this weekend. If you can register your kids and have them here, right? It's making sure that we're respecting family rhythms and giving parents the lead time and communication that they need to be part of our ministry and programming. Couple final points here. If we're going to give young people a bigger slice, it means that young people need to play a load-bearing role within our church. Do we have anyone who's in construction or engineering who can explain to us what is a load-bearing wall or a load-bearing pole? What does it do? Yeah, it holds everything up. The reason that it's load-bearing, it bears the load. If you pull out that pole, if you pull out that section of the wall, the whole building comes crashing down. What we've discovered is for a lot of young people in churches, they know that they are not playing a load-bearing role. They feel like they're like this kind of accordion wall over here in the corner. It's not load-bearing. You could remove it and everything is fine. The reason that it's there is either to divide the space, to be decorative. It's a nice add-on. It's not essential to holding up the structure. What we found is if we really want young people to play a key role in the life of our church, they need to know and feel like they're playing a load-bearing role. If you're not sure if they're playing a load-bearing role, we found there's few better ways than actually asking them. Do you know that you matter here? What do we do that communicates that you matter? Now, the flip side of this would be this piece. Please, please, please don't just use them as cheap labor, right? For many of us, it's, I don't know, who's going to do that? I don't know. Let's get the young people to do it, right? And they're kind of treated as last-minute, disposable, cheap labor. We do think that a game-changing question across the life of our church is this: how will young people be involved in this area? There may be some areas where young people might not be involved, but being open to asking that question across the life of our church, how might young people be involved? Before I wrap up and we turn to an example, I just want to show a quick video. It's about 1.5 minutes long. For some of you who are thinking, well, I don't know, how might young people be involved outside of Sabbath school or youth ministry? I'm going to show you a video that has absolutely nothing to do with church. This is from a documentary that was made a few years ago, and this is the trailer. But once you start asking the question, how might young people be involved in areas they weren't before, some creative solutions can come up. So here is this video.
Is there anything you would want to learn from the internet?
Woo, is that me? All right, let me try that again. Plugging in. And
Is there anything you would want to learn from the internet?
Could you explain a bit about this
Facebook.
Face something
Okay.
and you're having to be a friend?
I typed in www.email.com.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Have you ever heard of YouTube?
Yes, I've heard of it, but I have no clue as to what it means.
How many people here have used a computer? Well, we have some teenage volunteers who are willing to teach you how to use the internet.
I think I'm too old.
Hope you have lots of patience, young man.
Today we're going to go on Facebook. Do you remember how to get there?
Well, I think I just, no.
All these things that I never even dreamed about.
I love it.
Welcome to a whole new world of information.
Every time we're together, Shura just wants to watch cooking tutorials on YouTube. There's a big game called Minecraft. Maybe we could cook something that looks like one of the characters in Minecraft.
Hi, everybody on YouTube.
We should have you doing a music video.
My teeth are as fresh as hot popped corns, my OG teeth.
All of the other seniors are so inspired, so we're going to have a contest to see who gets the most views of their YouTube video.
Hello, YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. Hello, YouTube.
Today we are talking about travel.
Music. Sisterhood. Millie and Evelyn's is beating mine. I need more hits on YouTube.
This is the big moment that you've all been waiting for. The first prize winners of the Cyber Seniors competition goes to...
We all know how difficult it is to learn something new, but we really do feel that it can change your life.
So you got a friend request from...
Yeo, who's he?
He's in the same program.
Hold on a second, you got a message. Sure, Edie.
Hello, Ellard.
Oh, dear.
Look here, Ellard is typing.
Oh, hello, Ellard. Hello, Shura.
Megan said thank the people who taught you.
You're welcome.
Love you. You see a program like this, and they think it's an opportunity to get in touch with their grandkids and to communicate. No matter how old we are, we do need a purpose for getting up in the morning.
So as you think about growing together, we hope that that's a bit of a spurring some creative ideas, right? With that, let me invite our hosts up and take it into an example for what this might look like in practice.
I really want to know who won.
The movie is called Cyber Seniors. It's not from us, but it's a documentary that was put out, so you can find it there.
I'm actually looking forward to the day that my parents are on TikTok. It's going to be good. Yeah. Doing like, the Renegade and all that. Okay. Half of you knew what that was. Half of you are like, I need to go ask my teenager son. Okay, so we're going to invite up... Oh, actually, this is your part. I'm taking over your role. I'm so sorry.
Okay, we are going to invite up someone I've known all of my life, a great advocate for young people, who still calls me beautiful girl because when I met him, I was literally an infant. Mel, please come up on stage. Mel Lemke, everybody.
Can I have a hug? Sure. Okay.
Are you going to call him beautiful girl too? Or?
Yeah, beautiful boy, maybe? Yeah. Okay.
Here, take one.
There we go. Excellent. Yeah, you're a beautiful boy, Jake.
Oh, thank you.
Alina's asked me to give a bit of a reflection on where we are right now. And I'd love you to just pause and think about this moment. Here we have 25 churches in this conference, churches all over Australia, who have made a commitment. You're an integral part of it. Have made a commitment to building really strong relationships in our local churches and elevating the place of our young adults. It's pretty amazing. As I look out on this group, I think this is a Holy Spirit moment. This is a wave of God's Spirit sweeping over His church that will fundamentally transform the way we do local churches. That's not too big a statement. It's a really important thing. When Nick and I were here as youth directors back in the 90s, the World Church invested in this huge worldwide commission called the Youth Commission. And the idea of the Youth Commission was, we are tired of losing our young people to our church. This was back in the 90s. We're losing more than half of our young adults and we need to do something about it. And so we invested research and months of time in trying to figure out what can we do as a church to retain our young people. We had a document like this big, Nick, that came out of all of those study groups and those commissions, and this was the book of recommendations of what we would do as a church to address the loss of our young people. It did change some things. We did some pretty cool stuff here in Queensland. I think all of our local churches have a heart for their young people. I'm sure about that. We invest in our schools, Pathfinders, young adult ministry, but we don't really know as local churches how to elevate our young people into leadership. We look after them, we love them, but we're really reticent to hand over the reins and to walk alongside them. The Youth Commission was great in collecting data, and then it just sat on a shelf for 20 years in most places. And then recently I come back to Queensland, and here's Alina and the young adult team building a movement of young adults being integrally involved in the church. And I'm excited. I was like, wow. And then we have this amazing opportunity to partner with Fuller, with Jake and with Scott and the team at Fuller, not only to recognise the data matches all the stuff that we've done over the years, not only to recognise the data, but to give us a framework to do something about it. And that's what we missed in the 90s. We did the research, we said, yep, this is what we got to do. There was no framework to make it happen. Now, this moment, we have a framework. We have growing together teams, GT teams in each of these 25 churches, you. We have a commitment to going back and listening and telling stories and shaping culture, reshaping culture through the stories that we tell, through the relationships that we build, through the connections that we make. You see, my belief is, and I'm sure this is true, Every single person in our church, test, there we go, wants to know that they're loved, that they're valued, and that they have a place, that they belong and that they have a place to serve. Everyone, old people, young people. And so this is about building the holistic, this is about what the church is. Let's give every one of our members the chance to belong, to be loved, to be valued, and to have a legitimate place to serve. And if we speak that language and tell those stories and celebrate those stories when they happen, change will inevitably happen. That's what Scott talked about yesterday. It's not big steps. It's just doing the important things well. So I'm really excited because we have these two summits beginning and end of the year. We have GT teams in our churches. We have coaches that are going to be keeping in touch with you through the year. We have some very simple steps to follow because this isn't about change next week or change even by the end of the year. It's about long-term culture change. It's going to happen slowly, but it will happen. It will happen. This is a framework that we have that is extraordinary. And I just think we have what God has given us in our hands right now is profoundly important. We can't do what we did in the 90s as a church and stick that on the shelf and say that was a really good exercise, now let's get on to life as normal. We can't do that. This is a moment in time where we must change what our churches are like for our young adults, for our older adults, for our churches, and you're a part of that. So thank you. I pray God's blessing over you as you go back to your churches. Please don't try and change things too quickly. Don't do that. Just be invested in loving on your people, telling the stories, getting involved personally, getting to know your young adults and plugging them into ministry in the church, and change will happen. So God bless you.
Thank you, Mel. Yeah, appreciate it so much, really, man. It's nice. Oh, it's not on. Oh, no, it is. It is. It's nice to know that we're not pioneering something all on our own, that there's been people that we're resting on your shoulders and on the people before you. So thank you so much, Mel. Yeah.
We are now going to break for team discussion, and we'll come back in with a 2-minute warning. 2-minute warning this time, because we know that you're very hard to stop.